Hey World Civ, hope you're doing well, and I really can't wait to see your awesome faces in class next week. But since this is what we have for now, we're going to do the best we can, and you guys are doing great. Please keep emailing me or commenting on the Google Classroom if you have any questions. And if I haven't answered something by now, please email me again, because I've been trying to go through and make sure that I have everything answered, okay? So today we're going to talk about Earth's landforms. Okay, so first of all, what's a landform, right? Well, a landform is going to be any natural feature on the Earth's surface. Any natural feature. Also, if you hear meowing, that is my cat saying, hello, there is a lizard on the wall. Great. All right. Candid moments with Miss Sullivan. All right. So a landform is any natural feature on the Earth's surface. I'm sure the lizard will be fine. We'll get to him later. Well, not in our lesson. Just I'll deal with him later. Anyways, all right. So landforms. I'm sure you're already thinking lots of different types, because there are many different types of landforms, and we're just going to quickly go through these. Now, after this video, there's a short crash course video that I'd like you to watch. It's only 4 minutes long, and it kind of gives you another good overview of some of these landforms, just in case anything was confusing you. So, first of all, a pretty obvious landform is mountains. They're very high, right? They're higher than all of the surrounding areas. They're formed from plate tectonic movements, so the massive plates of the Earth, right, that all the continents sit on, sliding against each other, sliding and creating a mountain. They're also formed from earthquakes. They can be formed from volcanic eruptions, and they can be formed from erosion due to wind, water, and ice. What's erosion? Erosion is the fact that wind, water, and ice are constantly moving across the Earth's surface, changing it slowly every time. Think about the Grand Canyon. That was formed by river erosion, right? Mountains can also greatly impact Earth and weather patterns throughout continents, right? They have, they're in the way, so they change the weather around it. They have vast amounts of mineral resources, usually coal, silver, copper, iron, gold, can all be found in mountains. Okay, so what's the opposite of a mountain? Well, that's a valley, right? A valley is a low-lying area between hills and mountains formed usually by glaciers or by rivers over a long, long time. They're not formed quickly, right? They're named for their shape, right? Because valleys look like a V, valley. There's V-shaped valleys, and sometimes there's also U-shaped valleys, which are going to be a little bit more this way. So V-shaped valleys are usually formed by rivers, and U-shaped valleys are almost always formed by glaciers, because glaciers are bigger than rivers, right? Valleys, which are usually low, they're usually a lot less rocky than mountains, and they generally have more vegetation than mountains for a couple reasons. First of all, as things are eroding with the wind, the water, and wind, water, and lots of other different weather patterns, it's usually blowing or moving things off of mountains. Where's that going? Usually into valleys. And so all those nutrients, the soil and everything else that is blowing or eroding off of mountains is usually going into valleys. So valleys are very fertile for lots of plants to grow. Additionally, water is very plentiful in valleys because where does water go? It goes down, right? So if you put it on the top of a mountain, sooner or later, it's going to flow down into the valley. So valleys are wonderful. They're very fertile. They're very useful for land, for farming, all sorts of things. Okay, let's talk about a few more. Let's talk about deserts. Deserts, a dry piece of land, little to no vegetation. Does a desert have to be hot? No, a desert does not have to be hot. Most deserts are hot in terms of the really big ones that are famous, like the Sahara Desert, but there are plenty of deserts, smaller deserts, that are not hot. It just means that there's little to no vegetation because there's not enough rainfall. They're generally found on the side of a mountain sheltered by the wind because the mountain's going to stop the rain, right, from getting to the desert. Usually the air is very dry. Usually the atmospheric temperatures are going to be high, but not always. Few plants and animals thrive, and at night it can be freezing. So it changes very much. The temperature of deserts can be very extreme, all right? So islands. Islands, a piece of land surrounded by water on all sides. Pretty simple, right? Maybe some of you have even been to some islands. Islands are formed usually by hot spots on the earth or volcanic eruption. Climates of islands can totally vary, right? Think about the islands in the north of Canada versus the islands in the Caribbean. Um, but islands usually have their own unique environments and ecosystems because they're isolated. Islands don't depend on land around it. They're surrounded by water. And so usually islands are very heavily impacted by sea levels, storms, and hurricanes. So what else have we got going on? Well, we've got some plains. Plains are flat, low areas on Earth's surface. They can be formed from usually sedimentation, so dirt, soil, ground, of eroded soil, all the soil that's blowing or moving off of hills or mountains, and usually even from flowing lava deposited by wind, water, ice, things like that. Plains generally receive some rainfall, usually tall, dry grasses, relatively fertile soil. A lot of the Midwest is a plain. Is plains as far as the United States goes. So if you've ever been there, you've been to a plain. Now, another one that we've mentioned a lot, but maybe haven't explicitly talked about yet, rivers. Rivers are naturally flowing streams of fresh water. Rivers are fresh water. They usually descend from mountains, and they almost always flow into a lake, sea, ocean, or another river, right? They usually connect, they always connect to something. You can't have an isolated river. It might end up underground, but it goes somewhere. Rivers can run for hundreds or thousands of miles, and they can deliver fresh water to many, many, many areas. This includes areas without much rain, such as deserts. Rivers can carry soil as well and bring nutrients and minerals. So, for example, the ancient Egyptians used to depend on the Nile flooding every year because the nutrients from the Nile would fertilize their soil and enable them to grow crops for another year. So, speaking of bodies of water, let's talk about oceans. Oceans are the biggest bodies of water on Earth, and they are salty. They have saline in them. We call it saline if they've got salt. If you wear contact lenses, I'm sure you're familiar with saline solution. It's got salt in it. So oceans cover over 71% of the Earth's surface, and they are responsible for pretty much all weather and climates on Earth. Oceans usually originated in like the continental drift, and of course you've got God originally separated the land from the sea. So oceans are very important. They're very big. We actually know more about outer space than we know about our deepest oceans. So also talking of things that are made of water, glaciers. Glaciers are slow-moving, huge bodies of ice, usually formed by the compression of snow layers. They move depending on pressure and gravity. A lot of glaciers slowly move down mountains. There are two types. There are alpine glaciers. Alpine has to do with mountains, and alpine glaciers are found on high mountains. And there are continental glaciers, which are located in cold polar regions far north and far south. These aren't necessarily on mountains. These would be the glaciers that make up bits of like the Arctic and Antarctica. Glaciers can melt in the spring, which usually provides water to dry riverbeds. And scientists use glaciers to study the Earth and its past, because sometimes things frozen in ice can survive for a long time. Just like things in your freezer, food in your freezer doesn't go bad nearly as fast as food in the fridge. Glaciers preserve things. Okay, we got two more important ones, and one of them is very important for us because we live on it. It's called a peninsula. A peninsula is a large land area that sticks out into a body of water and is surrounded on water by three sides but connected to land on one. Florida, right? Florida is a very famous peninsula. So is Italy. But there's lots of them. Anything that's surrounded kind of on three sides by water, that's a peninsula. Peninsulas are also usually formed by the movement of the earth and the action of water currents. Environment of climate of peninsulas varies greatly. Historically, peninsulas are great because you have easy access to water, and so there's a lot of fishing, there's a lot of travel, water travel, anywhere where there's peninsulas. But at the same time on a peninsula, people living there still had access to the rest of the land. It's not like an island where you had to get in a boat to cross the water. So they weren't isolated. They just had very handy access to water. And the last one we're going to talk about is a delta. If anyone knows the Greek letter delta, capital delta is a triangle, and that's what deltas are shaped like. Deltas are triangle-shaped areas, not land-shaped like a triangle, okay? Delta is a triangle-shaped area at the mouth of a river. So when a river is flowing and then it fans out into a triangle. There's a famous one up the north of the Nile. Usually in the course of creating a delta, sand, silt, and rock particles accumulate in this triangular shape. Deltas are usually the most fertile areas in the world because of the buildup of silt and the fact that they're receiving a steady source of water. So if you were a person living in ancient history, you wanted to live by a delta. Okay? Just a few other plateau. A plateau is a large, flat, elevated area of land. Similar to a plain, but a plain is nearly flat. A plateau usually goes elevated and then stays flat for a very long time before it goes back down. So those are our big landforms that we've talked about. Again, the ones that we hit were plateaus, we hit mountains, valleys, deserts, islands, plains, rivers, oceans, glaciers, peninsulas, and deltas. You can check out the handout that I put in the Google Classroom for a print version of everything that I just talked about, okay? So you can follow along with that print version. You can reference it when you need help or when you need to study. Now, what do I want you to do now? I would like you to watch the 4-minute crash course video. It gives you an overview on some of the landforms that we just covered. Then you have 2 assignments for today. One of them is a Google form. Okay, the link is also included in the same classwork folder as this video. So first you click on the Google form and there's a picture of a map, a physical map with 8 locations pointed to on it. And I want you to label each of the 8 locations. You'll be able to in the Google form, okay? So just fill out the Google form, answer the last 2 questions, which are opinion questions. So as long as you back them up, you are good to go. And you can submit that one to me very easily by hitting submit at the bottom. The other thing I'd like you to do is there is a worksheet on different landforms that has 4 blank rows in it. You can pick any of the 4 landforms. I would try and pick a landform or 2 that you didn't know much about before, and you're going to just fill in those 4 columns about each of those 4 landforms. So you do not have to do all of the landforms we learned today. You only have to do 4 landforms of your choice. But again, I recommend picking the ones you didn't know as much about, okay? You can either fill that out on Google Docs by making a copy of it for your own to email to me. You can print it out and complete it on paper, or you can just recreate the diagram on a piece of paper on your own and bring in the hard copy next week, okay? So after this video, you have a short crash course video, you have your landforms questionnaire, and then you have your landforms worksheet, and that's our class for today. All right, you guys are doing great. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll have one more video lesson tomorrow, and then we'll hopefully, cross our fingers, and keep praying for it, be back to normal school next week. All right, guys, have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.